Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Gina Nichols, the CISO at Nymbus. Gina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning or afternoon.
Right. It's nearly both, right? Funny in between time. All right. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and a hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where CyberLinks comes in. We've partnered with the best cybersecurity companies in the world to be able to provide our clients with the best solutions at the best prices. So whether it's managed SIM, SOC, EDR, MDR, XDR, you name it, we'll help you find the right solution at the best price. Contact us at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Gina, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Nymbus and your role there as CISO?
Yeah, absolutely. Nymbus is a little bit unique in the market space today as a core service provider. So we provide core banking services on a much more modern platform. What's unique about Nymbus a little bit is that we do offering for the core banking, so like your full replacement of a core, but we also do what we call more of a sidecar, where you can kind of stand up a digital on the side of your regular banking platform, complete with an online banking platform that we supply, an onboarding or account opening, as well as the core and the back office to help run that, so that it gives the opportunity for a bank or a financial institution to kind of dip their toes in the water with something new and have all of the support on the back end to not detract from their regular day-to-day business. So it's an extremely innovative way for them to kind of test the waters a bit.
I love it. And, I think most people, when they hear banking, they immediately go to the Chase, Bank of America, the Wells Fargos, and it's like, oh, how does Nymbus play in there? But interestingly enough, there are a ton of kind of small independent banks and credit unions. And that's primarily the space that you guys play in, right?
Right. We use the core banking. So we're providing all the technology on the back end, yes, to support those small, mid, medium, larger institutions, all who are looking to test out with a new modern banking core for their back end.
I love it. Yeah. And it looks really cool, actually, from your website. I mean, it's funny because we started, when I started CyberLinks now 14 years ago, it was in little old Lexington, Virginia. And interestingly enough, there are, it is a small kind of Mayberry type town in central Virginia, really cool town. But interestingly enough, they have like three, kind of small banks and then some big ones. It's a small town and yet highly, lots of, the bank per person per capita is
bank per capita,
banks per capita seems kind of crazy there, but interestingly enough, so we still bank with Cornerstone Bank in central, and it's fantastic. And I think as soon as I saw you guys, I was like, oh, it's really cool, and it all kind of clicks. I know they use somebody, they're not using, it's not their thing, but when I saw you, I was like, it looks really slick. So I was like, maybe I should talk to Cornerstone and see about getting Nymbus in there, because you got some really cool stuff.
We do.
Let me ask you, so as CISO, how do you go? I mean, obviously it's a big deal. Security is top of mind for everybody these days. And now when we're talking security and financial, it doesn't get any more. I can't sleep at night because I'm worried about a breach. And so now you're kind of, I would imagine that the stress level, or maybe not the stress level, but the stakes are even higher for you because, right, you can't have, obviously, you want to keep everything very secure because you're providing a platform. So you not only have to keep your, Nymbus, the company, safe, but you got to keep Nymbus, the platform, which is using, all these banks are relying on, safe. So you look, well rested. You don't look stressed out of your mind. Is this like one of those ducks on water type things where you look all calm on the surface, but How do you do it?
I'm a calm person in general. I kind of probably grew up more so in a lot of stressful environments, I would say. So I just naturally in chaos, it's like, okay, I can keep my head above water, I can keep a level head, and I can, so it's kind of ironic that I ended up in security in a way, but it's a different beast for us at Nymbus because you're completely right. I have the side of Nymbus as a business, which is really a small part, right, of our day to day and the corporate and the corporate side of what Nymbus does. And we also then have our software development team and software development stack for the platform we deliver, as well as I have all of those financial institutions that we do support. So day in and day out, it can be conversations thinking about it with a bank or a credit union and like, hey, they have an audit or an exam that started from a federal regulator, and they're like, they're asking Nymbus questions. How do we respond? And I'm like, we've been through this, guys. Like, we got it. You know, we've been through our own exams. We've all been through them in both sides of the fence. So it's always interesting how, I guess, calm we are in those spaces. And when I sit there and have those conversations with them, it's not, it's worrisome, right? It always is. But I guess if you build that strong foundation at the beginning and how you have things designed, it probably gives you a little bit better peace of mind. Not that anything is ever out of the realm of possibility, but coming out of the banking space myself gives me a different lens when it came to Nymbus, because I'm not just thinking about it from the bank of Nymbus as a corporation. I'm also thinking can take off one hat, put on the next one. And I'm like, hey, I understand what our credit union is saying and what their risk team is concerned about. So playing that on both sides of the fence for us, and for at Nymbus, myself in the CISO role, my partners in the compliance team and in our fraud team, it helps us drive the product as a whole, and having those security pieces integrated into what our FIs are all looking for. So it puts us in a really unique spot, and myself included, because I kid you not, weekly, if not daily, conversations with the product teams of what we're doing, how we're going to do this. Is this okay? At the very beginning of their software development lifecycle, which is extremely beneficial to everybody as it moves on into delivery to our customers.
That's brilliant. And I think it becomes really clear just hearing you answer that it's not just that you're a calm person by nature, but it's the being prepared and squared away and the experience all combined to where, you don't freak out when somebody comes and be like, hey, they're asking me questions and I don't have the answers. You're like, I've been down this road before. I got the answers. We're well prepared here. We've got a process. Here you go. And I think that comes across very, clearly. So I think it's the kind of the experience and the preparation that helps you sleep at night. And while others are panicking because it's their first time doing it, you've been down the road, you know how it goes, and it's going to be just fine. So it was actually very reassuring for me. I felt much calmer asking my very amped up question. I was getting myself all nervous, and then you calmed me right down. So thank you. That was nice. Okay. Well, you mentioned your background, and I'd like to dive into that a little bit because I kind of love how everybody comes to IT and security from different backgrounds. I don't think we've ever had, two people on with the same, even kind of background. So what was yours like? How did you get to the top here?
How did I get to where I am today? So I literally started at the bottom. I answered the call center tier 1 help desk for the $17 or $12 an hour, sorry. To answer the phone, like, I need you to reset my password. I ran over my computer with a tractor. What do I do? I worked for the Green Machine, answering the help desk calls. So Global Help Desk Center, answering
Nice.
phone calls for them. So I worked actually my way through that, and then I ended up being transferred into their NOC, so their Global Support Center. So I kind of grew up through that area and through the infrastructure side. So had a really strong background there, but I did a bit of a pivot into more of the business side of things we were doing a bunch of doing a large divestiture. So sale of a very large company, have to untwine all of this technology that the last 30 years that we have been, part of one massive corporation. So learning to undo all of those and figure out how, I didn't know what a logical diagram was or a data flow, or figuring out what protocols and ports were being used at that point. So I spent a lot of the time then over the next few years just doing the untangle and then re-implementation as it takes to do that. So I learned so much throughout that process and had some great mentors, even from the technology side and the business side of it's very important to be able to bridge that gap of speaking geek and to get the geeks to get online. And I say that with affection and love. My teams are fantastic. And they always have been. And I also then can swivel chair and have the conversation from the business side of understanding that. And it kind of grew from there into some backup and recovery and some consulting and more mergers and acquisitions and divestitures. And so you get really good when you unwind and put things back together of understanding all of those bits and pieces. And it just stuck with me probably more so of, all right, I like to learn things about authentication and how you get authorization and permissions and how you can recover in a disaster if that is impacted for global companies. I worked for a manufacturing company that's in the top 100. So understanding the impact then was in designing disaster recovery for them was super intriguing and fun and something I had never got to do before. So it kind of just snowballed from there. And I did some consulting for a while, which gets you back into the same thing of, hey, let's go into design in these banks and credit unions or a hospital or a school for disaster recovery or Active Directory. So I've always been in that type of the space. And it's always, I think, it kind of served me very well as I've gone through and ended up at Nymbus in an odd pivot. We kind of collect the people we've worked with, and we kind of sometimes end up at the same places when we have a really good group. And I have a really, really good group at Nymbus that we absolutely enjoy working together. We're all committed to that. And so when I was looking to make a change, not because I didn't love my job, I was at Fiserv and I absolutely loved it. But I needed to make a change from a personal standpoint. So I'm like, what do I want to do? So I made the jump to Nymbus at the time. And it's been a fantastic ride ever since. But people are like, you were in, if you go look at my LinkedIn, you'll see that I came into Nymbus actually as a sales engineer. And they're like, what? How? This doesn't make sense. And I'm like, yes, well, when you have somebody who can talk tech to the tech folks and can turn around and talk and translate that, it's pretty beneficial in the sales cycle when you get to those roadblocks of you have to talk to security now. And you're like, oh God, here we go. Security team, here they come. They're have all of these questions that salespeople can never answer. And so it became really, really beneficial for us because it didn't take very long for people to realize, wait, she's not a salesperson, really. She actually, the development team started to figure out, wait, she might know a little bit of technology too. So when Nymbus, we needed to make a shift, I took our VP role for information security because as every company, as they're maturing from a startup phase, compliance actually comes first. Yep. So you check the box to get the compliance stuff done. And then you, obviously, as you mature, you're like, hey, we got to actually have the full security role and integrated into the business. And so our CISO role was born. And that has been my role now for the last, I don't know how many years. I've been here 4 years now. So it's been a while.
I love it. There's so many cool lessons, I think, to draw from that. I mean, the one, and we've heard it kind of, I wouldn't say time and time again, but we've heard it many times that, the help desk is such a great place, for people to start. I mean, we get all these CIOs and CISOs who are like, yeah, I love it when somebody starts at the help desk. They, you learn those people skills, you learn the basic tech stuff, and then you've got the opportunity to go off in whatever kind of direction really kind of excites you or is more interesting to you, right? So I think that's really, really cool and good for people to hear, because a lot of times I think kids are now influenced by Instagram and YouTube, and they think you have to immediately be flying a private jet or you're a loser. Like how are you 23 and you're not a billionaire? Because life doesn't work like that.
No.
And so I think it's really cool to hear those stories, and that you make these connections. The other thing I thought was really cool was the connections and the mentoring. So you'd mentioned there, and I'd like to kind of dive into it, because I think it's really important for the people coming up in tech to kind of hear more about this, because I think they're a little more detached, from people as we do more stuff remotely. I think it does them a bit of a disservice, because they don't get the kind of one-on-one or interpersonal, things, and they tend to devalue it more than than I think they should. I don't know. I think ultimately we'll find that's true. You'll want that human connection, but for you, it was those connections, and you mentioned mentoring. So I'd like to kind of dive in a little bit more, if you don't mind, and kind of talk about that, because you briefly covered it, but
Yeah.
I think it was a really important part of your success was the right people at the right time and how you interacted with them. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it very much was, because coming into as a young, right? As a young at the time, I think I was doing maybe tier 2 or tier 3 at the time when the divestiture came about for like network support and things like that. And when you hear at that age, you're like, oh, we're being sold. And then you're like, oh God, like what the hell does that mean? Everyone is, your people are getting a severance package, they're eliminating roles, and you're like, oh my goodness. And at the time, you're like, I don't know what to think. And I was, nope, you're not going anywhere. You're moving over here, and this is your new job. And so I was over my head a bit, and I'm like, how the hell are we gonna do this? Because we weren't a huge company at the time, maybe 1,000 total employees, and I say that in jest, right? 1,000
Right.
people now to me is
Right.
It wasn't. When you started out at a very large company, when you went to 1,000, it felt like it wasn't very big. So that just sounded odd. But I didn't think it was at the time. But I was in the same boat with the whole crew. Three of us were we're stuck together, saying, "Hey, this is your crew. You being me, you're the business analyst now." What the hell is a business analyst? Sorry, I don't know if
Yeah.
you were explicit on this, but I'm like,
No,
what's
we
a business
totally
analyst?
are. Yeah.
What's
Yep.
a business analyst? And then I got another one saying, hey, you're going to be the tech lead on this. And he's like, okay. And I got another one saying, hey, you're the program manager, project manager. And he's going, I just came off a tier 3 doing this. Like, what am I going to do? And it actually ended up for all of us being extremely pivotal, because we all very much fed off of each other. And our tech lead out of our team was fantastic at teaching me about all of the interconnectivity and how diagramming and how you can translate and tell stories that other people can understand in pictures. And to this day, I have one guy on my team that I've worked with off and on for the last 10 years. And even to this day, he will pick up things that I've said before, and he's like, here's your picture. Like, here you go. I drew all of the pictures that you need because it tells that story. And so that team, we learned together. We very much learned together. And we took from the company that we were, took a lot of guidance from the teams that we were migrating into, because they were more developed in process, right? They were even more mature, even coming out of our organizations. They were still mature. And so it gave us a really, really good foundation of how a mature organization operates. And then when you take that and when you take that back, and we all eventually, right, we all went our own ways, probably a few years later. One of them stayed with that company and did fantastic things. One of them actually went back to the company that we divested from. And I went on to work for another one, but we all took all of those bits and pieces, I think, with us and used all those tidbits every time. And I still to this day, like I use those same things and the same foundation of like the basics matter. And if you don't understand those basics of how things are connected and how they are working, and you can't secure it, you can't support it very well. And so my team and I now, being in a startup, I've spent the last 4 years building relationships with other people throughout the organization to help me peel back the layers of that onion. And it's hard being remote. Like if you're 100% remote, you don't get those sidebar conversations as much unless you intentionally schedule them. And that's what I do is when I came into Nymbus in the role that I did, I kind of like weaseled my way into, I'm like, hey, I want to listen in on this product call with the developers so I understand kind of how we're doing things. And I've just continued to do that and making sure that I connect with the people that are closest to our product, our developers that are doing work, some of our team that's working on some of our AI initiatives, our fraud team, like we stay so close so that I can continue to I learned so much I have one of our engineers we talk very frequently. So whenever there's a little tidbit of information that's peeled back as he's digging, he's sharing that. So he's like, hey, did you know this? Did you know how we have this set up or how this works? Or, hey, this cool thing. And it has helped very much in just my whole continuing to develop my skill set, the knowledge that I have within, as well as helping our team have a better understanding. Because the more we know, the better we can do. And that's kind of the most important thing for me is making sure they have all the information to do their jobs and my job successfully.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. And I couldn't agree more. And you touched on what you guys are, AI a little bit there. Yeah. And of course, everybody, it is the topic du jour. So, and I think rightfully so, right? Not to downplay it, but I think it's just so fascinating. And I think we're so fortunate to, I think we kind of grew up in a time with tech where we've gotten to see so much change. And I think our kids are going to see it's going to go even faster and crazier. Like our grandparents saw not a lot change. I mean, they saw some change, certainly, right? But the amount that we've seen change when it comes to technology is absolutely crazy. And the pace at which AI is changing now is just mind blowing. So with all that having been said, the question is, where do you see it, kind of playing in for Nymbus? What do you guys, what can you share there? I mean, kind of general ideas, things that are on the roadmap, things that you'd love to see in the future someday when it comes to, AI and Nymbus or banking or people in general.
Yeah. So on the Nymbus front, we've actually been working through from the AI perspective for quite some time in the realm for fraud and fraud prevention. So if you go out looking, you will see it's publicly available, our partnership with DataVisor. And so we have been, and we're probably a good probably 2 years down that road right now of getting to the point where we will have be able to do more of a real-time interdiction, gathering of statistics of you as a person logging in so that I can start to detect, hey, this, your keyboard movements aren't you. Those are not someone tapping, or that's not input coming from that specific device, so that we can start to have more control, not even control, but more visibility into what you look like as a person on a day-to-day, and when that starts to wax or wane from what the norm is. So we are well underway with that project here, and getting that off of the ground entirely. And we've been dabbling. It's funny when you say AI, right? It's like, hey, we have all of the things that have been AI enabled versus actual true, like I am doing a closed model, LLM. And so one of the guys on our team, we always laugh about this when we talk about it, but we've been doing some testing with a closed model right now. That is, him and I are very well. He's like, hey, this is my plan. This is what I want to do. This is how we're going to secure it. It's just a very, very small test case and stuff for doing some efficiencies within Nymbus. But he's like, let me poke around with a little bit of this model and see what we can do. And got it walled off. And so we connect on a regular basis on how it's going. And him and I are very aligned with doing we had to, create a governance process for us and for Nymbus and a policy for all of that too, which we worked on and got rolled out last year so that we had that framework in place. But we've had some things that we've tested and thought was going to be beneficial, whether it was some, plugins and utilities for helping with maybe code or validation of code and code review that just did not provide value, right? So it's like, no, that's off the table. We're not even going to go there. So we're heavy into just continuing on more of that discovery of what the right use cases are. Fraud obviously is the huge one for us right now, and will continue to be because that's the biggest threat to anybody is that those dollars in that account. So we've got a huge investment going on there, and I'm excited as it's rolling out, and we're getting to take full advantage of it across all of our clients that have elected. So
I think as you mentioned fraud and AI, I think that is obviously such a great place for it. And I think we've seen, on the credit card front, I think we've seen a huge improvement in fraud detection, over the years past, where it was like, yeah, well, you see your bill when it finally comes in, you're like, oh crap, and now it's a little late. And now you get that immediate phone call, it gets denied right away, and you're like, but it is me. But you don't normally buy this stuff in this location. But it's gotten really smart, right? And I think that's great. But what I'm curious about is when it comes to things like wire fraud, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of business email compromise where somebody gets somebody's email account gets compromised, and now they're sending wiring instructions. They've rerouted a legitimate wire, but to to the wrong bank, right?
Yep.
So things like that, is that something where I get just the magnitude of all of these banks and all the transactions. It's mind blowing. I mean, the sheer amount. No way a human can actually, even visualize how much money is moving, in any moment of the day, right? Let alone how are you going to catch it at your bank, when this transaction. And you think, oh well, they should have caught that, right? I mean, come on, it's a new account, and this wire comes in, but okay, but it's starting from zero. And if this is a legitimate business and they got this deal and now money comes in, what
Yep.
do you mean you're not going to, honor the what, right? So it's a really tough spot. And I think this is a great place for AI. Where do you see this playing out? I mean, you're clearly kind of in the trenches on the front lines of this. What are your thoughts?
There's a bit of a challenge with a lot of those, especially wires and how some of the processing works. If you're not familiar with banking as a whole, a lot of the back end of the US banking system is very archaic still. So it's very challenging. And the wires in particular, right? Those are still a lot of very manual work that takes place for wires to go. And so it's a great spot to add in the ability to, feed in some of the other information, right? Of like, hey, this is where I expected you as a human or you as the person or the identity within this institution, right? Having the rest of the information then and the profile of what they normally do and being able to incorporate that into the risk decision of that transaction is absolutely where those next steps will need to be, because that is where most of that, a very large chunk of that that and person to person, right? That's where a lot, and account to account, right? Those are the areas that we are focused on right now, is the P2P and the A to A. Fraud is a little bit different for Nymbus right now, because we're just a service provider. So the banks have a lot of decisions on how and what they do from a fraud perspective. I am not representing any of them, right?
Right.
They own their risk, they own their decisions. So they each get to decide like how and where and what their procedures would be for any of those types of activities. But yes, having that's really the challenge, like getting all of that data for that person together to make those decisions is going to be absolutely huge in combating that here in the future.
So this is a place where something like Nymbus, where you've got the core banking platform. So you've got all that data on that person, their transaction history, as you kind of mentioned before, how they type, the whole nine yards with AI. There's a whole lot of information you can put together on a person's profile when you see all their banking, their credit card transactions, who they are, how they act, what they do. So I would think that Nymbus is kind of in a rather unique position to help roll out, kind of an anti-fraud, AI, kind of powered solution for these small banks. Because let's face it, Cornerstone is not coming up with this on their own.
No,
Nope, that is not happening.
Which is why we partnered with Datavisor very much for that, because that is their focus, that is their, and we utilize that as part of our platform then, so that they're day in and day out, right? That is their bread and butter. So they can be focused on that. We partner very closely to keep them plugged in, because we can't be good at everything, right? So we know what we're very good at, right? We are very good at the user experience. We are very good at delivering on the online banking and on the core platform. And so we stick with what we know, and then we find the best of breeds to bring in and to enhance that experience and make it as seamless as possible as well, right? We again, the user experience is first and foremost on everything that is done. So that part is, we spend a lot of time in that front, a lot of time.
Well, and I honestly think you should. I think that's the right place for it. And God knows that it's not fun when it is a bad user experience for anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think Amazon made that very clear for everybody, that if you are not customer obsessed, you're doing it wrong. But so I think kudos to you guys for focusing on that. And I think so. What do you think in terms of AI being used in combating the ACH and wire fraud? Where do you see that playing out in terms of, like, if you had to guess, you look into your crystal ball, which I know is as good as anybody else's, but what do you actually, I think it's certainly better than mine when it comes to this particular question. How do you see it playing out? Do you see that something where it's going to slowly start trickling in over the next few years, or you would be shocked if we haven't solved this in 3 years and it's almost a thing of the past? What are your thoughts?
I wish we could get it solved that fast. I think the focus is still going to continue to be, at least the start right now, is going to still be on those P2P and A2A, because that is where the majority of your loss is going to be. The fast follow, right? 3 years in AI terms now is a lifetime, right? So I think it's going to be a pretty fast follow. I'd say within the next 18 months, they'd have it in a very good spot, especially from an ACH perspective, with the wires shortly thereafter. So we're gonna keep close eyes on that.
All right. Well, you know what? Since we're talking finance and we've mentioned the backbone, I'm going to ask you: do you foresee a future where it gets a little more modernized, where maybe it's not wires aren't so manual, where ACH is I know it's a crazy question, but
no,
what do you think?
There's movement. There is very much been movement in the right direction, and getting slow. I mean, I would say it's going to take 5 to 10 years for some of those pieces to still continue to mature into, I wouldn't even, a more modern approach, right? Not even necessarily, because when we talk some of the more modern approaches, right? We're native AWS and we're native container. Like we're talking very different than if you're talking to the Fed.
Yeah.
With how some of those actions take place. So,
Yep.
But we have to bridge that gap regardless, right? You still have to bridge the gap, regardless of like, hey, I don't want to do how that is, but we have to figure it out, and we have to figure out how to do those integrations in the way that we need to. So, I've been having debit card and cards in general is also kind of that same way. And I would love within the next 8 years to be able to at least have 40%, 50% that is able to be more modern or even cloud native. That would make my life so much easier and my network team so much easier because the complexities that go along with it. But that might be a stretch, really. It really might be.
As long as we're talking future and, what do we know? But as long as we're kind of theorizing on the future of financial products, I think the credit card, if you look at the history of credit cards, right, how they started and how it got so clunky, right? And I think it's a fair assessment that whole process is clunky just and not really modern. It's been modernized, on the front end, but that it's wildly inefficient. And so do you see, and because of that inefficiency, it now, comes with that finance fee, obviously, because, everything's catching up. There's some risk, blah, blah, blah. Get it. But do you see a future where there is a modern credit card alternative, something that is just works, it's modern, or is that do you see, well, let me start with that. Do you see that being even a remote potential?
Yeah, I see it as a remote potential. Absolutely.
One of those things where Visa, MasterCard, and the big players are not going to be happy to participate in its
There's going to be a
but,
disruptor. There's definitely going to be a disruptor at some point. It's not next year, but there's going to be 100%. There's going to be a disruptor in that space. It'll be fun.
I think so. I mean, it's wild. I mean, I'm not saying the Visa and MasterCard would have somebody off, but I wouldn't want to be the guy coming up with that without having good security. I'm just saying that's a lot of money. People died for less.
Yes, they have. Absolutely.
That's very cool. All right. So that's fun. And I think that's really fair. I think that, and what about on the Fed side? I mean, if we're talking modernizing, and I know it's crazy and nothing happens quickly with government except
no, I think true.
Yeah, right. I mean, if we leave Elon in there long enough, we may get a new financial system. He's like, I got to get back to cars and rockets. But if he were to stay, we might have a new financial system by the end of the year. But anyway,
I think the Fed's going to take some baby steps here. Absolutely. So that and I think it's going to come also partially is just from a cost reduction standpoint for them. I mean, keeping just how the connections for them work and the processing that takes place for them. You're gonna have to start to change that so that you can gain some more efficiency. I mean, Doge could help with that, maybe. I don't know.
Right? No, 100%. I mean, right? Where's tech support when you need them? So yeah, no, I think that's really, really cool. And it'll be interesting to see. I mean, as this technology plays out in, I don't want to say spills over into finance, but as the finance industry and banking starts adopting this, it only makes sense that it would seep down to the foundation, and that it would start being used there in the backbone of things and make it more efficient. And obviously you wouldn't start there. I mean, that's crazy. The technology has to be proven, utilized for so long, and then eventually make its way to those core, features. So it makes sense. I mean, we're being funny about it and all, but I think it's cool to hear that you think that's something that in the future we're going to see. And as long as we're talking about it, I got to ask, what's your take on use of things like blockchain when it comes to to things like Nymbus with the Fed. Do you see it playing out, or is it something where it's too early to call at this point? What are your thoughts?
We've had a couple conversations with various prospects over the years regarding blockchain. I still think it's going to be too early. It's too early. Even the conversations that I was heavily in with some of them, very intriguing, extremely intriguing. And I'm not overly risk adverse, but I was like, it makes me a little squeamish right now. I'm not sure I like that. So I think that's just going to be a bit too early to tell for that one.
Yeah. I mean, I think as with, just like with the rest of the technology, I think it dribbles in from the outsides. And as it gets adopted in places where it's not going to be, risk the entire, world, it kind of matures and we gain confidence in it. I could see it happening.
It'll
but
slowly work its way.
Absolutely. Gina, this has been so much fun. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about Nymbus?
Absolutely. You can find more about Nymbus at our website with www.nymbus.com, and YMBUS, as it says on my screen. You'll find there's another Nymbus as well. And you would also find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Gina, thanks. And until next time.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.